I did get a lot of questions about separation anxiety. I am going to go through the questions that I got on separation anxiety because I got a lot of them. And so if you have questions as we're going through it, you can leave your comments, but I'm going to make sure to get to these as well. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Natasha Daniels. I am a child therapist and I am the creator of AT Parenting Survival. That's the website, the podcast, and the YouTube channel. And I'm the creator of this amazing, awesome Facebook group. So I am really excited about this group because it is growing. But the cool thing about it is it's not losing its heart. And really that's because of our admins. And I want to thank all of our admins for doing such a great job. Lynn, Kelly, Anne, Andrea, they really, really do an amazing job at connecting with you guys and keeping this group loving, passionate, and supportive and informative. So I just want to give a shout out before we even begin to you guys. Welcome, Amy and Rebecca. We're going to be talking today about separation anxiety. How do you help your kids with separation anxiety? Where do you even start? So that is our goal for today. We're going to be hitting a big milestone today in our group. We are going to be at 10,000 people. Can you believe that? That's an amazing big group. So there'll be a little celebration later today on that topic. So I want to talk about separation anxiety and where you begin with that. And I think the important thing to realize and to start with is that separation anxiety is a symptom, and it is a symptom of something bigger. So you definitely want to dive in, and if you listen to my podcast or my website or anything, you'll hear me say this all the time, that you want to find out the core fear. And a lot of times people will think that separation anxiety, that is the core fear. And that is not the core fear, because I can have 5 kids with separation anxiety, and they can have it for all sorts of different reasons. So you want to ask your child, or you want to explore with them. That would be your first step when you're working with your child, is to figure out what is the worst part about being separated. And you'll be able to tell that when I go through all the questions that I got. I'm gonna have to do it on my phone. But all the questions that I got are so vastly different, because some people are talking about separation anxiety because they have a toddler, which is developmentally rather typical. And then other people are asking about separation anxiety and they have a teenager, and it may be a teenager with OCD. And that's just the broad range of separation anxiety. So I'm going to start reading these questions. We're going to go through it. But I want you to realize and start thinking about, what is the core fear for my child? When I say core fear, and Amy said, bad guys will get us while he's away. So that's perfect, Amy. So you know the core fear. So his fear is safety. Bad guys will get you guys. So Amy, when you say us, you mean that he's worried about your safety. And I often talk to parents and I say, separation anxiety typically is more focused on what will happen to my mom and dad when I'm not here, mainly mom actually, or what will happen to me. Most of the time there's one that's a lot stronger than the other one. And the reason why this is so important to figure out and to really dive deep into is because if you don't know the origin of the fear, it's like putting a Band-Aid on a wound. You're never going to get to the actual issue, because you really want to address his fear or her fear so that you can dive in. So Kathy said harm to me or himself. So you want to figure out what that is. Which one is stronger? And I think Kathy, you have a child with OCD, and I think you have a question that you may have sent to me. So we're going to get into that as well. All right, I'm going to dive into these questions because we're going to be able to flesh out things based on what is happening with these questions. So Chelsea said, why does it happen at different ages? Like at 6 months, then again at 3, why does it come back? And that is because it is developmentally appropriate at certain ages. So it is normal for a toddler to have separation anxiety. That's why it really is not a disorder. And when we think of separation anxiety, we go to the toddlers and we think that's normal. Now, if you have an anxious child, you're going to have separation anxiety much more intense than the other average child. So it will be a more intense developmental stage, and that might even be your first indication that you're dealing with an anxiety issue on a higher level than the other toddlers. But at 3, kids are starting to develop independence, and so there's this, I want to do everything myself. Where's my mom? I want to go all the way over here and explore, but where's my mom? So it's this very typical developmental stage where it's like, I want my freedom, but I also recognize that I'm only 3 and I don't know how to do a lot of things for myself, and so I need to reference back my mom. So that's classic normal separation anxiety. We're going to get into some that are less developmentally appropriate and things that get bigger. So Carrie wrote, she is 11 and refuses to help me. I wish I had longer arms. She is 11 and refuses to help me figure out her core fear. I suspect it could be the fear of throwing up, but she denies it. And that's the tricky part too, is that a lot of times, one, some kids may not know what their core fear is. So they're not trying to necessarily be difficult, but they don't know. But 2, kids with separation anxiety are actually, in my office, the hardest kids to deal with if it's only separation anxiety. And that is because they have a simple solution to this problem. And that problem is, don't leave me. I'll be okay if you just stay with me. So those kids tend to be the most resistant to wanting my help. They typically don't want to be in therapy with me. They are just not as gung-ho as a child with moral OCD. Most of the time with moral OCD, those kids are very eager. Not always, I'm generalizing here, but they're more eager to get into the office when I tell them, hey, this happens to people and I can help you with it. Separation anxiety, those kids are like, we got this. Don't tell my mom to not be with me because I don't want you to deal with that. So you're going to get a lot more difficulty when you're trying to pull out that core fear because they just want you to fix the problem and they don't want you to fix the actual core fear, if that makes sense. So I'm doing this once in a while because I'm trying to scroll down the comments as we go. Lauren said, when we have a good routine, going to school, separation anxiety is not a problem. However, when we're at home and I go to a different floor than my child or out of the room, she panics. What's causing this and how can I help? She's 4. So that's, again, a really good example of you needing to go and find out the core fear. Now, she's 4, so she's still in that range of it being developmentally appropriate. But I always think you can help your kids at any time. It doesn't have to be a disorder. It doesn't have to be a problem. Helping your kids with anxious thoughts all the time is an awesome parenting thing to do. So even when we're like, oh, you know what, she's 4, it's developmentally appropriate, you can start. And so I would ask her, what's the worst part? That's what I always say. What's the worst part about me being here and you being over there? And then finding out what will she say. Is it I don't feel safe? Then you're dealing with a safety issue, and then you want to address that. Shannon says, I want to take a trip with my husband, but my 9-year-old has articulated that she cannot do that ever. Where do I even start? So that's a really good segue because I wanted to talk about with separation anxiety, the first step is finding out the core fear, and that's super huge and very important. The second part is building skills where your child is at. And Carrie, I believe you had asked that question too. I was going to get to you, but you're at the very bottom, about how far do we push our kids. And separation anxiety is really, separation anxiety and sleep and emetophobia, the fear of throwing up, like those are 3 of the hardest issues, I think, to treat and to help our kids with because they are so insidious and they're just difficult issues to deal with. And so you want to start off, a lot of times I'll meet with parents and they want their kids out of their bed, or they want their kids to go to school, or they want to be able to go to a trip without their kids, or they want to have their kids be able to go to a sleepover. And that's their goal. But their kid can't even stay in a room by themselves. So you got to look at what your goal is and what your child is capable of doing. If your child is here and you want them to get here, there's a lot of space in between, right? So you want to start with, here my child is, and I'll give you an example. I've worked with kids where they're in the parent's bed and they're holding the parent's hand because they don't want to separate, right? And the first step, so maybe my goal is, I want you to sleep in your own room. I bought you really cute sheets and your room is awesome. I want you to get here. But I'm not going to start here, right? So my child is here in my bed holding my hand. So my goal in that moment is to have my child in my bed not holding my hand. That's the goal. I want them to get used to being in my room, in my bed, without the comfort of this. And then we're going to do this. And then we're going to maybe move you to a mattress by my bed. So if you have a child that can't be in a room without you, then the first goal wouldn't be, let me go on a sleepover. The first goal would be, let's have you go in another room and let's see how long you can do it. Let's start at 5 minutes and let's see how you can do that. I talk a lot about challenge ladders in the AT parenting community where I'm coaching parents, and we talk about one little baby step at a time. So you create a challenge ladder and you say, can I go into the kitchen and you can stay in your room for 5 minutes? Can I go into the kitchen and you can stay in the other room for 10 minutes? There are fun ways to do this. You can do walkie-talkies as a nice segue. So I'm in the other room, hello, Agent Jennifer, can you hear me? Yes, Mom. Yes, Agent Mom, I can hear you. You can make it fun. And that way they're also separating from you, but they still have that virtual connection with you. And then you get rid of the walkie-talkies. So there are very creative ways. But I do have to say, before I progress, if you don't address the core fear, which might be, I don't feel safe, maybe there's a bad guy in my closet, and if you're not there to protect me, I am going to be killed. Or maybe you're going to fall and you're going to get hurt if I can't watch you. Or maybe I feel like I'm going to get sick and I'm going to throw up if I'm not with you. If you don't address those things underneath, either with a therapist or on your own, the separation anxiety will not get better, because separation anxiety is a symptom. It is not the main dish. Does that make sense? I think that a lot of times people forget that, or they don't know that. They look at separation anxiety as the main issue and not as a symptom. So you'd want to start slowly. I want to get back to the questions here, unless you have some as well. Okay, so that was Chelsea. That was Lauren. And sometimes kids will not have a problem in certain environments because there is a segregate mother. So a lot of times, if there is a warm, fuzzy replacement for you, your child may not have separation anxiety. So if you have an awesome teacher, as long as there is some hand-holding from me to the teacher, then my child might do okay at school. Or if my child loves their best friend and their best friend's mom is very warm and fuzzy, they might be okay going to that place. Sometimes that confuses parents because they're like, well, I don't get it, because sometimes she has separation anxiety and sometimes she doesn't. And when she wants to go to her friend's house, she's fine. But if I need her to go to so-and-so's house or to school, then she freaks out. That's not your child necessarily being manipulative. It's your child feels like there's a good replacement for you in certain areas and not in others. Or sometimes kids will tell me, depending on their core fear, if I'm at school, I know my mom is at work and I know she's safe. But if I'm at school and my mom says she has off that day, then I'm worried, because what if she's okay? Who is she talking to? It really depends on the core fear. So sometimes if I'm afraid I'm missing out, then that might be an issue too. Oops, I forgot to turn my phone off. Okay, so it really depends. Let's see. That was Lauren. Amy, I think we were talking to you. Tips for getting him more comfortable being on his own in his room, in the house, teaching that being on your own is sometimes a good thing. And I feel like that's a little bit of putting the cart before the horse. Is that the expression? Or the horse before the cart? No, the cart before the horse. Whatever. Because you want to get to the core fear. So you want to figure out, is being on your own a good thing if it's not for him because he's so afraid? If he's afraid of bad guys, then being on his own means that basically he's vulnerable. So you have to teach him first that being okay, being on your own is okay. A lot of times I'll tell kids, and I'll tell my own kids, I don't keep you safe. We are safe. So you want to talk to your kids and say, if it's a safety issue, if that's their core fear, we are safe in this house. I'm not keeping you safe. We just are safe. Me being any closer to you isn't keeping you any safer. We are all safe. So you have to work on that first. And then sometimes when you're doing your challenge ladder, if you create really fun activities, you can teach your kids to enjoy themselves when they're by themselves and you get that kind of causal effect of A plus B equals C. I'm on my own. I really do a fun activity on my own. I enjoyed that. It was okay. But you can't do that until you get to the core fear. Tiffany said, kindergarten, it's awful. Oh, I know. My 5-year-old doesn't want to go to school because he will miss me, and now he won't go to his grandparents' house either because I will not be there. Once he is at school, his teacher is amazing with him. The poor guy has panic attacks most mornings at drop off. Any tips? Kindergarten is such a hard time because that really is when you see a lot of anxiety pop up for kids that maybe already are going to have anxiety because they're separating more than they normally do, and it's more independence. So I often hear that kids will say, I miss you, but to me, that's not the core fear. It does pull on parents' heartstrings because their kids will say, I'm going to miss you. I'm just going to miss you so much. Every time I've ever dug a little bit further, there is a fear underneath that. Tara said, I think for my daughter, especially at home, it's the intrusive thoughts that keep her from playing alone anymore. And I'm going to get to OCD in a second because that is so different. Carrie said, my 4-year-old diagnosed with separation anxiety, ADHD, and ASD panics when even thinking of me taking him to school. He cries, gets angry, gets violent. I'm at a loss. So with school, going back to Carrie, and it's hard for me to do this on here, Tiffany, Amy said, K was really hard for my son. First grade has gone much better. It does typically get better, especially if you stay solid emotionally, because a lot of times I work with parents who are anxious too, and we feed the anxiety because it's so nerve-wracking when our kids don't want to go to school. It makes us feel bad, and it's overwhelming. I would say there's a couple of things, and none of this will be a silver bullet answer because separation anxiety is really hard, and it is also a little bit slower to fix. There are other types of anxiety issues and OCD issues that are really quick to fix. Separation anxiety is a really hard one. So know that you are trying your best, and know that it will take time and patience, and that you're trying to get from here to here, and you're going to have to take these baby steps. So school or sleep or sleepovers are often a very high goal. And even though we have to go to school every day, that is a very high goal. And so you want to work, and this can sound like you're working on a separate issue that isn't really related, but you want to work on separation anxiety at home. Because if your child can build skills and know that they're okay when you're not with them at home, then they're going to be much better at school. You also want to explore what's the worst part about school, because it's different for each kid, and you want to do what you can to figure out how to make school better. Tara said she's incredibly bright, but the OCD has only recently come to my realization, although in hindsight it's been there one way or another. And we're going to get to OCD. I don't mean to keep putting OCD off. I just want to finish with the anxiety part. So partner with the school, get involved with the school right away, because they can come up with plans to either your child can go to school earlier, they can help set up the classroom, being a helper can be helpful, sometimes going to the counselor's office ahead of time. You can do a lot of stuff at the school that can help. My daughter, who's 7, she told me that there's a lot of things that bother her at school, and I was able to go in there and try to get some things fixed, change her seat or help her at lunchtime, things that were upsetting her that could be fixed to make things a little bit easier. So you want to do that. But then also at home, you want to start doing challenge ladders, and I can't go into detail about how to do them, how to set them up, because this is just much more educational. But you want to start doing things like that at home. So whatever that would look like, whether it's I'm going to go to the store and you're not going to call me and you're going to stay home with dad and we're going to see how you do. Or I'm going to go and walk to the mailbox and I'm going to walk back. Or you're going to go in your room for 5 minutes, then 10 minutes, then 15 minutes. Or you're going to go sleep over at grandma's house. Whatever it is, it will be different for every kid, because some kids are here and some kids are here and some kids are here. So this is just general. Let's talk about OCD for a little while. So OCD is very different than separation anxiety when we're talking about just pure anxiety. And a lot of times when kids have harm OCD or moral OCD, they worry that they can't be trusted. And so sometimes separation anxiety has more to do with, I'm worried that if I'm alone, I'm not safe to be by myself. And so ultimately, separation anxiety is just a symptom of the OCD, and you want to focus still on the OCD mainly. That's your meat and potatoes, working with the moral and the harm OCD. and realizing that OCD is a liar and that you are safe whether I'm here with you or not. And you do exposures related to that, whether you are putting them in a situation and you're not with them when they're doing an exposure. I hope that makes sense. So hold on a second. I know I missed a couple of questions here. Kathy said, my 5-year-old just diagnosed with separation anxiety. She becomes violently ill in the AM and throws up. She says that she misses me. Amy said, we had a school that worked for us and we were able to extend his time there slowly as he always was ready. And Carrie said, you go over challenge letters in a certain podcast. I really don't go over challenge letters. That's a much more meaty thing. I go over it in my online classes. And so I have parenting kids with OCD and I have how to teach your kids to crush anxiety. So those are much more in depth. And so I don't do podcasts on those, but my big classes have those that you can look at. And also the AT parenting community. I just opened that up last month, and that's ongoing support. And in that community, I do also, I'm constantly, every week I do Facebook Live class, and in the community I teach you how to go through challenges, and then in the forums I help people develop them. So there's a lot of support for that, and you can always go to atparentingcommunity.com and learn more about the AT parenting community. I have found that people just really want more support than I can offer them in a podcast, YouTube channel, or here. And so I'm not able to do everything for everyone. And so I created the AT parenting community so that I could do it full time. So I cut back my practice hours so that I can focus more on the online community as well. Abby said, what is your podcast? It is the AT Parenting Survival Podcast. So if you go to iTunes and you type in AT, just AT, one word, Parenting Survival Podcast, you will find me there. So I know there are a couple more questions. This is going to just be a little bit of a longer Facebook Live. If you missed some of it, I always put the replay up. I pin it to the top of our group, and I always take this video and I put it on my YouTube channel too. And so my YouTube channel is youtube.com/c/anxioustoddlers78. I make YouTube videos for kids, and I always put my live stuff up on there as well, so if you want to look at it. Kathy said, my 14-year-old with separation anxiety, social anxiety, and harm OCD. He has other OCD and sensory issues as well, but these seem like they hold hands. And yes, Kathy, they do. And like we said before, the harm OCD is probably driving the separation anxiety. Because if I'm afraid I'm going to hurt myself or I'm going to hurt other people, you're going to keep me in check. And so your presence becomes a compulsion. And so when you do exposures, and Kathy, I think you're in the AT parenting community, if I'm correct. So when you do exposures that we probably have talked about, then you'd want to incorporate him being alone as part of the exposure. So that can help. Tara said, I just want to say thank you for what you do. My daughter is one of those kids who don't like to admit anything is wrong. Her brother is diagnosed with Asperger's, Tourette's, anxiety, and gifted. Tara, it's my pleasure. I love helping people because I'm a mom of 3 kids with anxiety and 1 who has OCD as well. And so I totally get it. And I love talking about the stuff and helping people because a lot of the stuff is pretty simple. It doesn't get quick results, but what we need to do as parents can be pretty simple if you're just taught the right way, I think. Kathy said, yes, I think you are in my AT parenting community. There's a lot of people in there, so sometimes I don't recognize people's names, but I definitely recognize yours. And Tara said, and she really got help from your videos explaining OCD. That's awesome. I love to hear that. So yeah, Kathy, I would do the exposures and relate them. So you can, I like to sometimes do, and we talk about this in the community, and we can talk about it more if you go in the forums and you have questions about it, but I like to layer exposures. And so, you know, I would layer the exposure. I would do a harm OCD exposure, and then on top of it, I would do a separation on top of the exposure once he's used to that. Tara said, sorry, I pressed enter too quickly. I also have tics, OCD, etc. undiagnosed. Yeah, that is rough. And there's a lot, tics and OCD, they just love to go together. And so that can make it really tricky. I have a couple more questions I still want to get to. And I did plan on being on here a little bit longer because I knew I had so many questions. So if you need to pop off, that's okay. You can always catch the replay in the group. I always pin it to the top or on my YouTube channel. Laura said, yes, a 13-year-old can't sleep in her room and wants to sleep in the living room with me, but hard to transition to her own room because she has many OCD issues with her room. is so tangled up that it's hard to know I can't even read today. It's hard to know which to work on first. Right now we're doing ERP for OCD in the room. Yeah, Laura, I agree with you. I would start with the OCD. Find out what's going on in her room that is OCD triggering, work on that first, and then like I was telling Kathy, right, you would layer it, and then you would add the separation, and you would add her going into her room during the day, and then her spending more time in her room, and then her being in her room to sleep. So Sophie is an AT parenting community member as well. I recognize Sophie, and Sophie's been doing a lot of amazing work on her daughter, helping her. And she wrote, could her just right OCD be making her separation anxiety worse, or come in the guise of separation anxiety? So it's really the OCD and how to know the difference. And the cool thing with these members is I know more about their story, so that really helps. Abby found my AT Parenting podcast. Yay! Go check it out. I have 112 episodes, so there's a lot to go through. But Sophie, I don't think she's here with us, but I know a lot more about her family and her child because in the AT Parenting community, I really get to know people better. And I would have to say that I think Just Right OCD does have an impact with her separation anxiety, because she thinks that if she gets off to a bad start in the day, her entire day is ruined. And so there's an irrational OCD component that is more about her Just Right OCD. The morning has to go just right, and if it doesn't, then I'm going to have a horrible day. And that's more OCD related than separation anxiety. So I think it's feeding into it. I would slowly, and you can talk to me in the forums in the community, but I would slowly try to mess up her morning on purpose. You'd partner with her and you'd say, let's just do something that's going to mess up your morning so it's not perfect, right? And Marshy is the OCD name that your child has. So I'd say, Marshy just wants everything to go so smoothly. We're going to mess it up a little bit. What can we do to poke back at Marshy? So using that approach would be really helpful. Kevin said, my 11-year-old son was diagnosed with OCD last month, and we're learning exposures right now. We were told to start with small obsessions and compulsions first, but we find that depending on that day, they have different levels. We are having a hard time as parents staying consistent on what ones we work on. Should we stick with one and continue the exposure? Well, hopefully you're in therapy if your son was diagnosed. And I'm not going to go into exposures today. That is really something that I teach more in the AT parenting community because they are very specific and they're very detailed. And so I don't want to just give you advice randomly. I'm trying to stick to separation anxiety today. So I would talk to your therapist about that and see what they say. Some people, their OCD is constantly changing, and there's so much that goes into giving you suggestions on that, whether like what the theme is and what you're working on. I don't want to dive into that. I want to stick to separation anxiety. Justine wrote, my 10-year-old daughter just cannot sleep away from home. She has to, and Justine is a member too of the AT parenting community. She has to be with mommy. She's British. She's desperate to do it, but I always get a call at 11 p.m. I've tried rewards. I thought it was because she was worried about doing her OCD things at bedtime, but she says it's not, that she just has to be with me to feel okay. So I would challenge that idea. And Justine, you can get more support in the forums as a follow-up from what I'm about to tell you. But I would challenge that and say, your OCD is telling you that you have to be with me to be okay. What would happen if you're not with me? And so you want to get to that core fear again, see if it's OCD or anxiety, because it could be anxiety, because most kids with OCD will have anxiety as well, and find out what that is. And then you want to challenge it. And so if there's something other than just going to her friend's house that you can do, go to the store and then say, and I always try to sprinkle humor into my stuff. And so I might say, were you okay? Did anything bad happen to you while I was gone? It depends on your child. I do that with my kids. And you want to build up some evidence against the OCD that you're okay without me here. It's your OCD is lying to you. But definitely dive into the forums, and I can give you more help with that. And we'll be doing our Facebook Live class tomorrow for the AT parenting community. Although we are going to be talking about negative kids, kids that get stuck in that negativity. But we can also talk about that as well. And then Carrie was here, and she did have a question. I think I already answered it, but I'll read it again. How hard do you push severe separation anxiety when it comes to school? It's been 3 years of school refusal because of it. New independent school is great with allowing me to come and stay, but even with me in the building, she still struggles. The tension with how hard to push and when to back off is so hard for us. If we push, it usually ends in panic attacks and going home. So one, you want to figure out the core fear. So you said you think it's throw up. You want to dive into that even though she's not open to really expressing that. And then you want to, sometimes what happens with separation anxiety is people will think that there is a problem outside of their child. So they will say, you know what, I think that school's the problem. And so as long as my child doesn't have to go to school, then they're going to be okay. And now sometimes that is true. Sometimes, the school is just overwhelming, or it's not a good fit, or there are mean people there. There's tons of reasons why school cannot be okay. But a lot of times, and I would have to say more often than not, but I just want to say that sometimes it can be, it's not that. It's just going out and being away from you. So it's good that you found another school that's working with you. That's awesome. But a lot of times what I'll find is sometimes people will homeschool, and then for a while the anxiety goes away and they think, phew, okay, we dodged that bullet. And then it pops up in other ways, like they can't go to sleepovers, you can't go to the store, you can't go to sleep on your own. It morphs into more things because anxiety is greedy. So I always tell people, no matter where you're at, whether you're homeschooling because of anxiety, or you're having to go to school because of the anxiety, you always want to say, where is the sweet spot where they are slightly uncomfortable, but they're not panicking? And there's this fine little sweet spot that you want to find, and that's where you push. So Carrie, if there's a place at home, whether it's being in another room, or you going to the store, or you going sleeping over at a relative's house so you're not in the house, or them sleeping over at a relative's house. There are a zillion different examples I can give you of separation that is not the full separation of whatever would make them completely panic. So you would want to be working on that. That can be really, really helpful. A lot of times people get complacent because they put a Band-Aid on the problem. And I'm not saying this about you, Carrie. I'm just saying in general. And then we're like, whew, we're good. And then a few months later, anxiety's greedy, and so it starts to up its game. So you always want to be finding where that sweet spot is, whether it's literally in the bed, not holding hands. That's the progress. Or you're in class, and then maybe, you sit in the back instead of the front with her. We're out of her eyesight. Maybe that's the first baby step. And then maybe you're outside the door, and you're right there, but she can't see you. Whatever that sweet spot could be. Kathy says, he does stay at home when I have to take his sister somewhere or run errands now. And then his therapist, wait a minute. He does stay at home when I have to take his sister somewhere or run errands now. And then his therapist, I no longer text him when he asks when I'll be back. We could not do this a year ago. That's awesome. Leaving him with someone else or an activity isn't happening yet. We're going to start working on social skills and social anxiety in the near future with his therapist. What an awesome plan. Yeah, and you know what? You partner with your child and you make this challenge ladder. And Kathy, we talk about challenge ladders in the community all the time. You make these challenge ladders, and they don't have to be huge, right? You say, I don't want you to text me back. And when you want to text me back, I always like to do the red thought and green thought. And Kathy, hopefully you know what I'm talking about. You want to feed the green thought too. So when you have a thought that says, oh my gosh, I don't know if my mom is okay, I want to text her, or I'm not sure exactly what his thought is, then my green thought would be, you know what, nope, that's my anxiety or that's my OCD, and I'm not going to text her back. So it sounds like you have a really good plan and you've got support. So just take it one step at a time. I think that is really key. So I think a lot of times people feel like the only progress is the ultimate goal. And I've had parents who I've worked with in my practice where the kids have had extreme separation anxiety and have been maybe in the bed with the parent and can't be anywhere else in the house and can't sleep over at someone else's house and has a hard time going to school. And we'll get them to the point where the child can sleep in their own bed, can be in another class, in another room, and can sleep over at a friend's house, but still has a hard time at school. And the parent will be like, when are they going to be done with this separation anxiety? We're making no progress. And I'll be like, are you kidding me? Your child is awesome. Look how far they've come. They're not in your bed anymore. They can be in another room by themselves. They can sleep over at a friend's house. So I think in general, what I'm trying to say is we want to celebrate every little step and not hyper focus and hyper fixate on the ultimate goal. Because if you focus on the feet and the one step in front of each other, you're going to find that you eventually, and it's really your child, will eventually get to the goal. You just want to be patient and you want to praise every step, because I find that our attention to positivity and to the progress that they're making, no matter what it is huge. It's contagious. Our attitude is contagious. So don't get complacent and not work on it, but also don't get so down that you're not meeting that ultimate goal. Don't catastrophize and be like, what is this going to look like in 5 years? Or am I going to be, are they going to be living with me until they're 40? You don't want to do that. You want to focus on what's my goal for today. Today my child was able to, have me go to the store and not text me. That's huge for today. So Kathy said, thank you so much. This has been a game changer for us. Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate it. I appreciate that it's helping. Blanca said, my daughter was 8 years old when she realized she had extreme separation anxiety. She had her first sleepover and her friends last year at the age of 17. We celebrated. Yes, celebrate. Because when you celebrate, your kids feel the excitement and they get excited and they get proud and they want to do more of it for themselves, not for us, right? Because it's important to realize that this is their journey, not our journey. We're just here to help them. So I hope you found this Facebook Live class helpful. I am here every single month. I come into the AT Parenting Survival page, this is group, and the last Wednesday of every month I do a different topic. And you can always just look, and normally I try to post a couple of days ahead of time and let you know, hey, this is the topic that I'm going to be dealing with if you have questions. And then that way you can see that thread and you can ask your questions. I make sure to answer the questions that I get ahead of time so that even if you're not here, you can watch the replay and get your answers. And Carrie said, this is super helpful. I've been frustrated at the slow process, but after 3 months of no school, she has been doing about 3 to 4 half days a week. I have to remember to celebrate this. That's huge. Totally celebrate it. Don't get bogged down by the ultimate goal. Celebrate the little steps, because I guarantee you when you celebrate every little step, you're going to be moving in the right direction. So I will be popping in and telling you that we hit our 10,000 today, and I look forward to talking to you guys next month. And if you want to talk to me tomorrow, I have weekly classes like this in the AT Parenting community. Check it out at atparentingcommunity.com.